Good morning. Well, today our goal is to uncover architecture's forgotten language of beauty by reclaiming ornament. This presentation is a continuation of our conversation last year where we started talking about beauty and the brain. Now, as we contemplate why ornament is needed, consider these quotes. A building without ornament is like the heavens without stars. Or, ornamental art is perhaps the first alphabet of our human thought to come into close contact with space. Now, in light of these quotes, I was reminded of my first visit here to Oslo last year, when I encountered a stark difference between various buildings. Now, this could be anywhere, right? Some of the modern buildings, however, significantly lack ornament. Could we say that they are starless heavens? Maybe they're culturally illiterate, or even ugly, soulless buildings. So what makes the difference? According to Dimitri Porphyrios, novelty, ephemeral pleasurability, consumable iconographic individualism, and unmediated industrial production leaves humanity yearning for an authentic culture, rich in myth and symbolism. One of our colleagues, Nikos Salingaros, also has said, modern architecture detached itself from any higher order in human existence, turning away from both nature and from the sacred. It was the first time in human history that humans began to intentionally create unnatural structures that are uncomfortable to inhabit and to experience. So the question we ask ourselves is, will turning back to nature, the sacred, and ornament fill our yearning for authentic culture? Before we answer that question, however, what is ornament and its role in solving this conundrum? A simple answer is that ornament is more than decoration. It's architecture's way of speaking to the soul. There are a number of excellent books on architectural ornament that I'll be pulling from in this talk that help us define what it is, but most importantly, helping us understand its purpose and why we need it. As a result, this talk aims to reclaim ornament as essential to beauty, emotion, culture, and well-being. Now, as we know, ornament comes from the Latin verb ornare, which means to confer grace or honor on something. But it also means to decorate, to furnish, to adorn, to garnish, trim, to embellish, ultimately to beautify. Now, for the ancient Greeks, however, there was an intricate connection between ornament and cosmos. According to Isidore of Seville, writing in the 7th century, he said, the Greeks adopted a term for world derived from ornament, on account of the diversity of elements of the beauty of the heavenly bodies. They call it cosmos, which means ornament. For with our bodily eyes, we see nothing more beautiful than the world. Close quote. The verb cosmeo, on the other hand, suggests putting something in order, making it ready, arranging it. But it also means to decorate, to adorn something. So for the ancient Greeks, cosmos was opposite of chaos. Now, this reminds us of the first primordial couple in the Abrahamic traditions who lost their home in the paradisal world of Eden. They left the ordered paradise, or cosmos, and they entered a chaotic, fallen world seeking shelter, the primitive hut. According to Karsten Harries, architecture deals with the terror of time, first of all, by wresting from an unstable, uncertain environment a more stable order, transforming chaos into cosmos. Now, with the Platonic triad of truth, goodness, and beauty, I would like to propose that ornament, for it to be successful, should also follow this triad. Ornament should be designed with beauty. Ornament should defend the authentic. And ornament should ultimately inspire the spirit. And we're going to talk about these in a little bit more depth. So truth. Let's consider how ornament is connected to truth when it is designed specifically with beauty in mind. First and foremost, ornament has the ability to symbolize truth and to reveal the real nature of things, the order of the cosmos. Let's consider this quote by a contemporary theorist and the Finnish architect Juhani Palasma. He says, "More than ever before, the ethical and humane task of architecture and all art is to defend the authenticity and autonomy of human experience and to reveal the existence of the transcendental realm, the domain of the sacred." Now, what I'd like to point out is that architecture and its ornamental art can and should reveal the reality of this sacred ordered cosmos. Another philosopher, Carsten Harries, says, "The sacred continues to need architecture if it is not to wither, and architecture needs the sacred if it is not to wither." Now, in the 5th and 6th centuries, the Pythagoreans believed in an ordered harmony of the cosmos. The gods had created order by setting limits upon chaos, thus leaving a cosmos, and it was beautiful. The ritualistic practice of geometry, number, and music could reveal these patterns of being, notes Patrick Webb. Consequently, one of the best textbooks we have on truth and beauty is found in the mathematical symbols and patterns found in nature. According to the mathematician Michael Schneider, he says, "Nature itself rests on an internal foundation of archetypal principles, symbolized by numbers, shapes, and their arithmetic and geometric relationships." Now, from Genesis to the Middle Ages, God was viewed as the divine architect who not only measured, weighed, and laid out the cosmos, but also garnished, adorned, and ornamented the creations, such as the heavens. Indeed, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Divine order was believed to permeate the universe and bear record of its creator. Consequently, as Dennis McNamara writes, an architect who believes that God ordered the world, giving everything number, measure, and weight, will search through nature and revelation to design buildings that reflect the divine order. He continues, another who believes that the only knowable thing about the world is its chaotic bondage to disorder, anxiety, and despair, will design buildings that, as many deconstructivists do, put chaos into built form. Now, this thinking reminds us of Palladio's teaching. He says, if we consider this beautiful machine of the world, with how many wonderful ornaments it is filled, and how the heavens, by their continual revolutions, change the seasons according as nature requires, we cannot doubt, he says, but that the little temples we make ought to resemble this very great one. We're obliged to make in them all the ornaments we possibly can and build them in such a manner with such proportions that all the parts together may convey a sweet harmony to the eyes of the beholders. Close quote. So for Palladio, imitating the patterns of creation in nature allowed the architect to learn the divine pattern and ultimately to become a co-creator of the sacred. Now, this reminds us of a quote by Mircea Eliade, the historian of religion, who says that reality is a function of the imitation of a celestial archetype. Similarly, Hugh Nibley explains the temple is a scale model of the universe. It is the reflection on earth of the heavenly order. Now, in the history of religions, they call this imago mundi, image of the world. According to Lindsay Jones, architectural expressions of imago mundi, or cosmogrammatic ordering, involve constructions that are conceived as downsized replicas of the universe or images of the world. Both the builders and users imagine in these cases that there is a direct parallelism between the macrocosm and the architectural microcosm. Close quote. Now, recently, Carsten Harries suggested that perhaps the profession's downfall could be corrected if they reappropriated the wisdom buried in the traditional understanding of architecture as repetition and image of the cosmos. So how do we begin observing nature's patterns as architects? At Utah Valley University, we asked this question. We began by teaching our students the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s of sacred geometry. Our students use a compass and a ruler to geometrically construct polygons, going through the numbers 1 through 12. The students then apply these geometries to things they observe in the natural and the man-made world. But we also learn from the past through measured drawings, through clay and plaster molds, and ornamental drawings. And then in the first year, students apply those lessons to small design problems, such as pavilions and monuments. The goal is always well-proportioned, geometrically composed solutions. But where does one go to design ornament that reveals and reinforces the purpose of a structure? According to Stephen Sens, he argues that it is virtually impossible to invent a new system of ornament, just as it is virtually impossible to invent a new system or a new language. Ornament, he explains, works like grammar. Its forms drawing life from the repetition and subtle variation while remaining grounded in memories and recognizable models. Now, according to Franz Mayer's Handbook on Ornament, one of the things that is important to understand is what are the elements of decoration, which he calls, or the types of ornament. He breaks this down into 3 overarching categories: geometric forms, natural forms, and artificial forms. So as we look at some of these geometric forms, we saw some of these in Anders' presentation yesterday, but what I really appreciate and what students like is that he breaks down the geometry to help us understand how to reconstruct these. He also looks at natural forms, from vegetal forms to animal forms, and ultimately to human-based forms. And lastly, he shows us artificial forms in the examples of trophies and emblems representing the various disciplines. Now we ask ourselves, well, what about the composition? How do you lay ornament out? We recall that Alberti defined beauty as something that had this proportional harmony between all the parts. So does this work for ornament? According to Auguste Racinet, yes. An ornamental composition can only be perfectly beautiful when it produces in the spectator that sentiment of repose and satisfaction, which results from the equilibrium and perfect harmony of the elements of which it is composed. Now, Racinet continues, and he suggests that the laws of proportion, the laws of balancing and symmetry, the subordination of details to the whole, variety and unity, all these rules, he suggests, dictated by instinct and proclaimed by science, are binding on the art of ornamentation, as on all others. Now, this is something to keep in mind, especially when you're designing ornamental details of stained glass windows. But this brings us to our second point, goodness. Ornament rooted in goodness is beneficial because it defends the authenticity of human experience and cultural memory by communicating its purpose. According to Kent Bloomer, ornament is a natural and universal system of human communication. Ultimately, it can be an important aspect. He suggests even it has a psychological function as it's a composition of culture. Now, as architects, we can defend the authenticity of human experience by preserving the spirit of a place in our ornament. While working on 4 nearly identical temples in different geographic regions of the United States for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, our design team carefully studied the local flora and fauna so that the ornament could speak of the unique place. So at the Baton Rouge, Louisiana temple, for instance, we use both classical ornament as well as local flora and fauna, such as the magnolia flower, crepe myrtles, and seashells, on column capitals, stone panels, stained glass, and millwork. On the other hand, at the Memphis, Tennessee temple, we wove other local flora, such as the pawpaw flower or infinity bell, into ornamental details. We worked with local artists and artisans to bring these details and sketches to life. This included stained glass, stone panels, millwork, decorative metal railing. So ornament isn't just historical, it's a living language that can evolve with culture, material, and meaning. In fact, new advances in technological tools can assist us, but they should be viewed as means to an end instead of ends in themselves. Today, ornament returns through sketches, digital drawings, sculpted clay, digital models, water jet or CNC fabrication, and hand-carved stone. The goodness, truth, and beauty of ornament is once again seen as vital. According to Richard Glazier and James Ward, the function of ornament can convey different meaning based on its design. For instance, if we're trying to convey something that is symbolic or allegorical, we turn to ornament to reinforce a building's purpose. The same could be said of using ornament as a mnemonic device or strategy to convey learning and understanding. But ultimately, we can use ornament if we want to add to the aesthetic quality of a space or object. So let's look at some examples of this across centuries and cultures. Ornaments in ancient Egypt, for instance, consisted of a rigidly systematic arrangement of plants native to the country, geometric patterns, and pictographs, which we call hieroglyphics. In fact, ancient Egyptian manuals on the, quote, correct construction and decoration of temples also abound. The use of such imagery on surfaces transformed walls, ceilings, columns, beams, and furnishings into sacred texts that we could actually read. Those messages embodied creation myths, the primordial mound, and ultimately, Egyptian temples became an imago mundi. Now, Greek ornament refined natural forms into idealized acanthus leaf scrolls and precise meanders that emphasize proportion and harmony. Racinet notes that the conventional Greek flora is very far from being an accurate representation of any species of plants. It merely adopts their general characteristics. Colorful polychromatic decor reinforced meaning and allowed the patterns to be read. And we recall that for the ancient Greeks, they believed in an ordered cosmos. And reflecting those patterns were important in connecting to the divine. As George Hersey explains, an ornamented temple is one prepared to honor the god. Now, Byzantine ornament was about surface transformation. Multicolored mosaics, fine scrolls, and deep-cut capitals dissolve structure into visual theology. For the past few years, I've been working on an archaeological project in Israel where we've digitally been reconstructing a basilica. And I can attest that there is very many rich theological messages embedded into every single piece of ornament. Now, the medieval concept of ornament revived ancient Greek thought, especially manifest in the monastic tradition that studied the quadrivium of arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, notes Kent Bloomer. Gothic ornament is always kept in its strictest subordination to the form. It never overgrows or conceals the masonry substructure, but on the contrary, it's especially employed to supplement and complete the expression of the form in a harmonious manner. Entering the medieval church was a foretaste of the heavenly city of God. Now, in Gothic cathedrals, ornament was an integrated part of the structure. Rib vaults, finials, and tracery guided the eye heavenward. Beauty in service of belief. This student project sought to do just that. Now, Renaissance ornament marked a revival of ancient proportions in classical ornament. In fact, 4 of Alberti's 10 books were dedicated to the topic of how to ornament the sacred, public, and private buildings. As evident in Alberti's facade for Santa Maria Novella, ornament was rule-bound, yet expressive, and conveyed a revival of classical harmony and proportion. According to Renaissance cosmology, number and geometry were a link between the human and the divine. Now, sacred spaces have to be adorned and ornamented with care, according to Alberti, because these were the greatest and noblest ornament a city can possess. In fact, they are the habitation of the gods. Now, the Pazzi Chapel in Florence by Brunelleschi also demonstrates this, and how classical ornament with a religio-cultural message can be embedded in natural elements. Also, the Porto Sanctum, or Holy Door at St. Peter's Basilica, that the Pope uses only once a year, this uses the composite order as a symbol for the abundance of entering the gates of heaven. Now, one method of helping my students learn and appreciate the subtle variations of Renaissance ornament and design is having them select one of the Renaissance masters as their mentor. Let's say they chose Palladio. They would have to choose and study Palladio's work and design as if they were working for Palladio himself. Now, this is very similar to what Kent Bloomer advocates in the ability to nourish and renew this language of ornament. But as Racinet showed, how ornament spans across cultures, whether it's Chinese, Persian, Moorish, or Byzantine, it's a visual grammar shared across humanity. In this Jewish Orthodox synagogue proposal, one of my students worked to blend architectural elements and details inspired by both Moorish and Swiss traditions. Another student designed a mosque using motifs of the Great Mosque of Isfahan and the Suleimani Mosque in Turkey to help him apply Islamic geometrical motifs. But is this limited to the Western tradition? No. One of my students tried to design a Tibetan Buddhist monastery on the island of Hawaii. This student carefully researched religio-cultural precedents, motifs, symbols, sacred scripture, ornament, flora, and fauna to design an appropriate solution. Here, another student designed a more restrained Presbyterian church in Hawaii, but also tried to incorporate the local flora and fauna. Ornament is never just decorative. It's always communicative, symbolic, and sensory. Reclaiming it enriches life. And our last principle is when ornament is rooted in beauty. Ornament following this principle is lovely to experience because it inspires our human spirit. It nourishes the emotional brain, and it evokes delight, inspires wonder, and instills pleasure to the viewer. We recall that the Roman architect Vitruvius advocated that good architect, one of the 3 things, had to be venustus, beauty and delight. Now, if you look at all these 3 quotes, the commonalities between them is that ornament has a performative function to give pleasure, delight, repose, and satisfaction. So in light of this, ornament can be viewed as an emotional catalyst for placemaking. As one approaches the facade of St. Peter's Basilica, for instance, various patterns strike a sense of awe and grandeur. As you get closer and closer, more detail comes into range. And ultimately, important biblical scenes transform the exterior space into a memorable religious place. So what makes ornament successful? According to Stephen Sims, the best ornament is achieved by continuing smaller scales the same interplay of geometry and gesture that animates the building as a whole. He suggests that ornament is this architecture of the near view. Now, he continues and explains that ornament distracts and directs the eye, making proportional divisions visible. It enlivens surfaces. It mediates changes in plane and underscores significant lines. It introduces symbolic and narrative content and offers pure pleasure to the viewer in its modulation of light and shade. Now, as we discussed last year, our brain makes a judgment call in the first 3 to 5 seconds as to whether something is interesting to look at or not. Several studies have shown that humans linger longer on ornamented buildings with more details, while blank buildings don't hold our gaze. The same holds true when we look at variations of a Roman Doric order from Robert Adams' book, Classical Architecture. We can see that as the Roman order in its fullest expression, with the triglyphs, garners the most attention. Now, eye tracking emulation experiments also confirm what thousands of years of tradition have already known. Both on the conscious and unconscious level, humans love detail, curvature, and symmetry. Ornament calms, it delights, and it heals. So in conclusion, as Zecke and Reisner have suggested, in our daily activity, we seek the beautiful to nourish the emotional brain. The universality of architectural beauty probably lies in satisfying inherited brain concepts of proportion, harmony, and geometric relationships that are more formally expressed in mathematical terms, close quote. So as we come full circle, ornament's success depends upon truth, goodness, and beauty. When ornament is grounded in truth, it is designed with beauty to reveal the order of the cosmos, nature, and the sacred. When ornament is rooted in goodness, it defends the authenticity of human experience and cultural memory by communicating its purpose through the symbolic, mnemonic, and aesthetic. And lastly, when ornament is founded upon beauty, it inspires our human spirit. It nourishes our emotional brain. It evokes delight, pleasure, and satisfaction. To build without ornament is to build without poetry. Let's rediscover what architecture used to say and still can. We reaffirm the enduring importance of ornamentation by presenting it not as a vestige of the past, rather it is a dynamic, evolving language of beauty that continues to enrich architectural expression and human experience. Thank you very much.